new report just released today says too little is known about concussion risks for young athletes, and it's not clear whether better headgear is the answer. Reports of sports-related concussions have been rising, including the recent confession from longtime NFL quarterback Brett Favre.
I think after 20 years, God only knows the toll. This was a little shocking to me that I couldn't remember my daughter playing youth soccer.
Well, joining us now is Dr. Rika Cole, from the medical director at the Queens Center for Sports Medicine. And you know what? I think one thing that's great is just the fact that the discussion in recent years really has been expanding. The research really has been expanding. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think in the past, when we were growing up, the thought was, oh, you just got your bell rung, just get out there and play again. And we've really learned that the philosophy has changed. We don't want athletes going back in if we suspect a concussion. They come out of play until they've been seen by a doctor.
So what are doctors looking at? There's a whole array of things that are being considered, discussed as to what needs to be thought of when we go forward in this research.
Well, I think the big question is, what are the consequences of a concussion? And we don't have the evidence yet, and I think that's one of the big areas we need to look at is, if you sustain a concussion, is there a long-term effect, more than just the short-term effect of confusion and headache and the nausea that may come with it? What else happens down the line? Are there things like long-term thinking or cognitive effects? Are there emotional effects like psychiatric problems? Is there things like substance abuse that may be more likely because of the concussion?
Really important point you put out, too, that you don't necessarily need to, as you mentioned, black out. I think most people think you got to be knocked out if you got a concussion.
Absolutely right. In fact, only a quarter of the concussions really involve loss of consciousness. So the vast majority, 75%, don't involve any type of passing out or losing track of time.
You know, so I think right now, especially morning, everybody, as you mentioned, heading out right now, important to note what families need to be thinking about, because this focus really has turned to youth athletes in particular. What does mom and dad and the kids need to think about when it comes to sports and concussions?
Well, I think we don't want people playing afraid, meaning we don't want them always looking over their shoulder afraid that this next hit is a concussion. But the flip side to that is to really know the symptoms, that if you have a headache after being hit, if you feel dizzy, if you feel nauseous, light is more sensitive to you or noise is more sensitive, you're confused, you're lining up on the wrong side of the field, you don't remember your play, that could very well be a concussion. They need to come out, and they need to stay out, and they need to be medically evaluated. Not necessarily an emergency, but medically evaluated.
Well, very important food for thought. And thank you so much, Doctor,
Absolutely.
for coming down and
Thank you
talking
for
to us
having
about
me.
that and continuing the discussion. So, still ahead.